Hi guys and welcome back to Winners and Losers. Today in a special episode we're going to be looking at the managerial merry-go-round that has been this summer. Patrick's away though, so I'm joined in the studio by Christopher Hamill. Where are we starting, Christoph?
Well mate, we're going to start with Manchester City's very own philosophical genius, Pep Guardiola.
We are indeed. Now, Pep Guardiola has had a mixed pre-season, but we know he is a serial winner. This is a man with a 73% win ratio. He wins a trophy every 20 games of his managerial career. That is a ridiculous statistic. However, the squad he's working with at Manchester City has some holes, and I think that's an understatement. He's brought in a couple of signings, Ilkay Gundogan and Nolito from Celta Vigo, which is a very interesting signing. However, this to me shows a shift in his transfer policy. He's no longer looking to sign the world beaters of yesteryear, the likes of Paul Pogba who have moved to Manchester United. He's instead looking at a step down and potentially building a team for the future. That's possibly why he's looking to sign a player like Leroy Sane from Schalke and maybe even John Stones from Everton. Now, these young players are already going to be coming into a very thin squad, in my opinion. There are a lot of holes in it, and made even worse by the fact that pre-season has been a shambles, hasn't it, Christoph?
That is one way to put it, Joseph. Pre-season has been a farce. Let's start with the Bayern Munich game. They lost 1-0, but they didn't have any senior squad members to call upon because they had an elongated break from the Euros. The Dortmund game was more of an indictment in terms of what Pep's got to work with and how he's got to move the squad forward. They started with a very interesting, to say the least, 3-3-3-1. Didn't work very well, to say Dortmund were on top of being an understatement. They changed to 4-3-3 at the break. They looked a lot more comfortable. I mean, Dortmund only equalised the last kick of the game and Man City eventually won on penalties, but he did cut a very forlorn figure on the sideline, especially when Willy Caballero had the ball at his feet. At one point, he had his head in his hands. We all know Pep likes a goalkeeper like Valdez, like Neuer, who can use his feet, make those 20-yard passes. Caballero is not the man, and Joe Hart must have been watching with great interest. But you're right, pre-season has been a shambles. The bird's nest debacle in Beijing meant that the tasty prospect of a pre-season Manchester derby didn't happen. They've only got Arsenal to play on Sunday in Gothenburg. And Pep just hasn't had as good a pre-season or time to prepare that squad with a fat Nasri in as much as his closest rivals.
Yeah, nowhere near as much. You talked about Fat Nasri there. I think that's possibly the least of his problems, particularly defensively. I think there's a fair few holes. He's talked about the potential of having to play Fernandinho as a centre-half. Now, we know Fernandinho is versatile, but whether or not he can drop into the middle of a back three remains to be seen. There's big question marks over him. Going forward, I think they've got a fantastic setup. Kevin De Bruyne, David Silva, Aguero look very tasty. However, midfield and defensively, I think he's still a couple of signings away from a title-winning squad anyway. But what do you guys at home think? Is it a title-winning squad, or is Pep still a way off? Let us know what you think in the comments below.
And the next new man at the helm we're going to discuss is Chelsea's Italian Antonio Conte, Joe.
Yeah, very, very exciting. One of my favourite managers in world football. We saw how good tactically he was with Italy at the Euros, and I'm sure Chelsea fans at home will be equally as excited to see how he does at their club. However, for me, like Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, Chelsea have a rather undercooked squad. They've got a lot of ageing players in defence, particularly John Terry, Branislav Ivanovic, Gary Cahill's not getting any younger either. And for me, it's the whole spine of that team which is a little bit rotten. We talked about the defence there. He's clearly after another centre-back. Had moves to Koulibaly of Napoli rejected a while ago now. And now Napoli have no real need to sell after selling Higuain to Juventus for 94 million euros. They don't need the money. So Koulibaly looks like he'll stay at Napoli. So that's one defending option down. Where's he going to look? Nobody else is quite sure. Then you go into central midfield. You have moves for Radja Nainggolan rejected of Roma to instead move for Kante. Kante, probably the signing of the summer. Amazing signing. However, probably also needs a second central midfielder if he's going to play a double pivot because Fabregas can't quite play and there needs to be more attacking. And then up front, he clearly needs another option. Diego Costa the other day caught talking to Sergio Ramos saying he wants to leave the club for Atletico Madrid. However, they've signed Gamero, so that now seems off. However, when you've got a disconsolate Diego Costa up front, you can't be happy, especially when you're then going to be relying on a 22-year-old Michy Batshuayi who's not been there and abouts in the Premier League before. So there's a lot of pressure, and that spine is pretty rotten, isn't it, Christoph?
I mean, you talk about rotten, Joe. Did you see the first half against Real Madrid where Marcelo effectively took the piss in front of 1,000 people. Admittedly, there were a lot better second half when Hazard came on and he scored 2 and Conte reverted back to a 3-5-2. But he started with a pretty daring 4-2-4, which he first employed at Bari to a great degree of success, and Siena. Later on at Juventus, he played 3-5-2. We expect to see that at Chelsea this season, but fullback looks to be a difficult area for him. Look at Marcelo's first goal when young Aina was dispossessed far too easily when he's marauding up the right, and he charged through the left. Cahill was in no man's land. Ivanovic looked about 41 and they scored. But Joe, it remains to be seen how the Chelsea squad, a very temperamental Chelsea squad, responds to his disciplinarian ways. He's very similar to Jose Mourinho in that sense, has total control, demands total focus. We saw him kicking every ball on the sideline at Euro 2016, bad-mouthing Shankaneri went for a bad touch. However, have heard some interesting anecdotes about how he likes to bring the squad together. Apparently, especially when he's at Atlanta, he's a big fan of the cinema. Took the squad every week, all expenses paid, slush puppies and all. Talking about keeping people happy though, Joe, what a segue into that. Eden Hazard, no European football next season. How does he keep world beaters like that happy with just domestic competitions?
Well, as we know, there's a lot of prima donnas in this Chelsea squad, potentially the reason that Jose Mourinho got fired. And as you mentioned there, Eden Hazard is definitely one of them. In the first half of last season, he was very cold, didn't score many goals, didn't get many assists. However, second half of the season, he really came a bit more to life under Goose Hiddink. And at the Euros with Belgium, he was far, far improved. So this season under Conte is possibly Eden Hazard's defining season. Is he going to go on to the top level players like Neymar, or is he going to flop and potentially drop down a level to similar levels like Juan Mata has done? Now, I think that's a very, very big question, and whether Conte can get the best out of him remains to be seen. The next boss on our radar is, of course, the golden man of Old Trafford himself. It's Jose Mourinho, Christoph.
The Golden Man, that is a new one, Joseph. What I will say about the Golden Man is that he hasn't messed around with his pre-season targets, has he, mate? Nailing down 3 of his big 4 that he's after. Paul Pogba still pending, of course. However, pre-season form has been inconsistent. They got a rudimentary win against Wigan, then they went to play Dortmund and got absolutely schooled, being thrashed 4-1 in the process. I still think Marcus Rojo is eating the turf somewhere in China. The first half against Galatasaray was very disjointed, albeit Zlatan breaking his duck, which is great to see. Looks like he's slotted in that sort of leading the line role seamlessly. However, second half, when Rashford and the likes of Ashley Young came on, you guys were much more fluid in attack. So has that game begged more questions than it's answered? For me, probably yes. And it looks like United are going to have a huge call. It's well known that Mourinho likes a squad size of 24, so I think the ruthless axing of the deadwood begins, mate, with the likes of Schweinsteiger, Januzaj, Fosu-Mensah maybe pretty harshly, Darmian maybe pretty harshly, looks like he's on his way back to Serie A. What do you think? What else needs to be done, Joe, to take United to the next level?
Well, I think there's a few changes that need to be made. However, what you can say is that Jose Mourinho knows his formation right now. That is something you can't say about Pep Guardiola. You can't say about Antonio Conte. What you can say is that he's going to be playing a 4-2-3-1, and his signings have been specific to that formation. He signed Zlatan to lead the role. He signed Mkhitaryan for the right-hand side. He signed Eric Bailly as a centre-back, and probably Paul Pogba as that other central midfielder. However, going forward, doesn't seem an issue to me. Like you talked about then, Zlatan leading the line, fantastic. Mkhitaryan created. You've got the Wivenshaw Eusebio on the bench, Marshall Rashford, who comes on, scores when he wants. Fabulous player, amazing prospect. However, the real problem is at the back. Chris Smalling still doesn't have a centre-back pairing. I don't care what you say about Daley Blind. He's not a Premier League centre-back. Fantastic distributor of the ball through midfield. Really, really does that well. However, not strong enough to play in there. Eric Bailly hasn't had 50 appearances for Villarreal. You can't expect him to start 50 times in the Premier League this season. So I think for me, they need at least a centre-back and a right-back. I don't think Darmian's done it since he came in from Torino. Was potentially a left-back and a right-back. More of a cover player. So you've not really got a right-back nailed down spot, and you haven't got a centre-back. Those defensive positions are the reason that Manchester United are still a little way off from winning a Premier League title for me. And they've also got the Europa League, so might need that slight bit of depth going into the latter end of the season. However, how do you guys think Manchester United have done so far this summer? Are they still a few players off from winning a title, or are they bang on it with Jose Mourinho? Let us know what you think in the comments.
And the next big wig we are going to talk about, Joseph, is Italian Carlo Ancelotti, the eyebrows himself, How do you think he's going to fare at Bayern Munich?
Oh, those eyebrows are going to be moving and a shaking. Hell of a summer he has had. Transfers as well as already having a very, very deep squad. The two names most notable, of course, that he's brought in, Renato Sanchez and Mats Hummels. Mats Hummels makes that defence the best in Europe, in my opinion. Plays alongside his compatriot Jerome Boateng with Manuel Neuer in behind. Joshua Kimmich as well, one of the best young defenders in the whole of Europe. He's got Philipp Lahm, he's got David Alaba. What a defence that is. Moving into midfield, it's so deep, it's almost not even worth talking about. Renato Sanchez, one of the best young talents in the whole of Europe. He's signed, probably going to play a backup bench role to the likes of Arturo Vidal, Thiago, Xabi Alonso. There's too many names to talk about. And then going forward, explosive power of Lewandowski with the threat of Douglas Costa, Kingsley Coman, Frank Ribery, Ian Robben. There's too many amazing names in that team to talk about. He's probably going to win another Bundesliga as long as Borussia Dortmund don't challenge. First season with some of the young players they've signed. However, the real test for him is going to be the Champions League, because that's what they want, isn't it, Christoph?
Yes, Joseph, and if you want a manager to take on that Champions League mantle, it is Carlo Ancelotti. The guy is the only manager to have won it 3 times, which is a hugely impressive record. He's got a win ratio of 60%, which equates to 2.01 points a game. Again, hugely impressive. And I think those players you talked about beforehand are going to work wonderfully in his preferred 4-3-3 system. And we talk about squad depth. Look at the game against Inter Milan last week. They beat them 4-1 with youngster Julian Green scoring a hat-trick in 35 minutes in what was a virtuoso display, one of my favourite of pre-season. And on the topic of youngsters, he doesn't mind shifting that responsibility their way. Look at the likes of Kingsley Coman, who he gave his debut to at 16 at PSG. And should he need to dip his toe back into the transfer market to make another signing to strengthen that already ridiculous squad, he has the ability to do so. In this off-season, Bayern Munich have actually posted profit, selling the likes of Götze, Röder and Højbjerg. It is ridiculous. But do you think they have a strong enough squad already as it is to win the Champions League like us? Or do you think they need to make further additions? Let us know in the comments below.
So that was our winners and losers managerial merry-go-round special, but who's going to have the biggest impact at their club? Let us know what you think in the comments below.
And the talk about managers continues, but this time across the continent in our Euro Roundup special you can watch by clicking here.
And as always, guys, please do like and subscribe.